accept boxes of shipped white geese at any time for opportunity for our hunters, but we're not sure that'll stick. So this psychedelic beach ball that I get to look at every year is a percentage of harvest by duck species found within the state of Arizona. What affects this pinwheel is not only a selective targeting by hunters for which species they're after, but as well as the birds that happen to be in relative abundance here at the same time. And a lot of this is reflected in the type of water we have or the type of habitats and environs, simply because many of these species have different feeding characteristics or habitat needs. Starting at the 12 o'clock position, rolling over to the 3 in clockwise fashion, you'll see that big dark green pie. Those are mallards. Mallards are always the #1 species harvested within the Pacific Flyway inclusion for us. Roughly about a quarter of our ducks tend to be in that segment. The other next big electric green pie is green-winged teal. This is usually as well reflected in the Pacific Flyway as the second highest harvested bird. So things are not out of the normal for Arizona in 2016 and 17. I don't have the numbers yet. I probably won't until August or September for the most recent season of 17-18, but I can tell you this dramatically changed. The migration last year, if you talk to any waterfowlers, migration really didn't come to Arizona simply because it was so much warmer. Utah never froze. I got a call from their biologist about 2 weeks into January asking me what the heck's going on in Arizona, simply because he hadn't had any band returns yet. And generally we provide about 30 band returns a year from his geese as well as cinnamon teal. Likely the big white pie at about the 4 o'clock position is American widgeon. That will likely be the #2 duck in Arizona in 2017-18 for the first time in decades. The teal simply just did not come. A lot of species did make it, some didn't, just depending on where the cold fronts hit and where they didn't. One other thing I'd like to note, at the Pacific Flyway Wing Bee in February that I attended, I had some serious questions about one of our sublimits regarding Mexican or Mexican-like ducks. We're one of 5 states that has this sublimit in place, even though the Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't recognize the Mexican or Mexican-like duck as an official bird, because the American Ornithologists Union doesn't. This has kind of been a long-standing argument between most of it, and Arizona is a big contributor of Mexican ducks historically. And so because the migration was so poor, as well as my own observations from looking at Facebook photos and things like that, just to see what folks were harvesting, at the Wing Bee we set aside all of the what are deemed mallard wings for Arizona off to a side, and I discovered about 60% of our harvest that would have been called mallard was actually Mexican or Mexican-like duck. This is kind of a high watermark in regard to it. So going forward, we're going to continue to monitor how much of that mallard segment is Mexican or Mexican-like duck, because most of the time they're not able to pull them out as easily as the other species separated from mallard. Just to touch base, to put this on your radar, Arizona's duck future, even though most of our ducks come from Canada up north, as I just spoke about, there are a couple of ducks we grow here in state, Mexican ducks and wood ducks. Going forward into the future, I just wanted to put this on your radar because hopefully you'll be hearing a lot more about these from the small game program as well as some of the regions. We are beginning to ban, we're back in the banding of ducks business. For Mexican ducks this year, we'll be banning all ducks that we catch, but of particular emphasis on Mexican ducks, so we can start to lead the charge on getting Mexican ducks back on Fish and Wildlife Service's radar, simply from what we found. As well as wood ducks. We have a very small wood duck population within the state, but there's a lot of habitat that's inaccessible to hunters. Currently along the Middle Verde as well as Oak Creek Canyon areas, and we're investigating right now the possibility of a wood duck box program like they have in Fallon, Nevada, where they've grown wood ducks from a few hundred to several thousand over the last few years. So they can feed out to other areas and possibly increase that small little wedge of purple that I had on that beach ball before. So the Pacific Flyway is all based on the Western mallard model. This is what drives, of course, mallards are our most abundant duck, and so it drives the seasons here in the Pacific Flyway. According to the model, these are the package types that are available to us: liberal, moderate, restrictive, and closed. And these have changes within their season dates as well as possibly bag limits as well. The current mallard model specifies a liberal season with the 7 ducks, no more than 2 hen or Mexican-like ducks here in Arizona. As I stated before, other species have specific management plans within that, and that's what causes these sublimits. Pintail, the current model, is for 107 days with a 2 per day season. Last year we were at 1. This was the first time we dropped to 1 in about 9-10 years. So folks are happy about pintail going back up again. The scop season, that model specifies a little shorter season, a season within a season, essentially 86 days with a 3-bird bag. Canvasback, same with 107 days and a 2-bird, and as well as a redhead model with 107 days and a 2-bird bag as well. Arizona is split into 2 areas, the mountain zone and the desert zone. The mountain zone starts at least 2 weeks earlier before the desert zone, simply because we know some of the birds are up there a little earlier than most, but we're also trying to take advantage of them before it freezes over there as well in some years. So our waterfowl season recommendation starts with a 2-day junior season. It starts before the mountain zone, and it starts at the end of the desert zone. So 2 days on each for those for youth only. The falconry only season is a 4-day, happening in between our juniors and general waterfowl seasons on either end as well. The general waterfowl season, 101 days given to the general waterfowl hunters, and then a scop season that starts a little bit later. These have kind of an odd start date because the 86 days, they start on a Saturday instead of a Friday. However, there's not too many scop in the state at that particular moment. We're waiting usually for the migration for most of them to show up. So we start them to run until the end of the season. Bag limits again, 7 duck daily bag with 7 mallards, no more than 2 female or Mexican-like ducks. Pintail at 2, redhead at 2, scop at 3 with the 86-day season, canvasback at 2. The black-bellied whistling duck is a self-imposed sublimit we're putting in this year. We've seen a very long-term decline working with Troy Corman on a lot of his Christmas bird counts and things within the black-bellied whistling duck segment. We're the only state in the flyway that has this particular duck. This is one of the other ones that we can grow, and hopefully we've had some boxes out in the past, but we're trying to limit hunters' take to 1 on that. All other ducks, of course, are at 7. The possession limit is 3 times a daily bag, of course, for 21 ducks. For geese, white geese, which includes Ross, Snows, and Blues, we have a 20-bird daily bag. Dark geese, which is Canada, Brants, and White Fronts, is a 4 daily bag for that. Possession, of course, 3 times a daily bag, so 60 white geese and 12 dark geese in possession. Coots and moorhens, the bag limit for these is 25 singly or in the aggregate together. Possession 3 times, of course, it's 75 singly or in the aggregate. The recommendation of the Commission is prepared to hear it.
Go ahead.
The Department recommends the Commission vote to approve Commission Order 21 waterfowl in accordance with the final federal frameworks as presented.
Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Chairman, the hunt recommendation Commission Committee has met and supports the recommendation for Order 21, so I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve Commission Order 21 waterfowl. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to Commissioner Davis's favorite recommendation, Commission Order 22 snipe. Hip harvest here as well, because this is a smaller group of folks. It's hard to hit. You can see that has been occurring in the last 8 years through hip harvest being a little bit more sawtoothed. We do recognize the snipe harvest is kind of a dying tradition within the waterfowling community because it's almost half upland, half water, and it takes a little bit of different specialization in order to harvest these birds, but they are quite exciting and great tasting. The season recommendation this year is it will follow the waterfowl season dates, open at the same time with a bag limit of 8 per day and 24 in possession. And the recommendation of the Commission is prepared here.
Go ahead.
The Department recommends Commission vote to approve Commission Order 22 snipe in accordance with the final federal frameworks as presented.
Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Chairman, the hunt recommendation committee of the Commission has met, still does not believe that snipes exist, but we support the recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Commission Order 22 snipe. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our final commission order for migratory birds is Commission Order 24, Sandhill Crane. Arizona is unique with this particular bird because we have 3 different populations who winter here. This graphic shows the mid-continent population, which is roughly at about 475,000 birds. They come right into the southeast corner of Arizona. The Rocky Mountain population, which is about 22,000 birds, comes into southeastern Arizona as well. In the Rocky Mountain Management Plan, Arizona is required to maintain 2 wintering roost sites, which we do through our Whitewater Draw and Wilcox Playa areas. And our hunt structure is based off an allocation of Rocky Mountain population, not the mid-continent. As well, we also have the lower Colorado River Valley population, which numbers about 2,000 between the lower Gila River, lower Colorado, and Salton Sea areas. This population remains unhunted as of yet. The Sandhill Crane permit allocation of the 2017 Rocky Mountain population recruitment was just slightly below the long-term average. However, they're still doing very well. The fall survey 3-year average is a little over 22,000, as I mentioned. This is above the population objective we have set for these birds. Arizona's check station showed that we harvested about 69 RMP greater Sandhill cranes of the 511 cranes total last year. Arizona's allocation this year is 159 or 57, which is down from the 169 received last year. That's just due to a population adjustment on that upper end. The allocation formula is based on the RMP management plan, as I spoke about. So there were really no changes other than calendar shifts to the general Sandhill crane hunts. There's 5 in the multi-area of Wilcox and the Sulphur Springs Basin, 90 hunters apiece with three permits per hunter, and then Unit 28 5 hunts with 12 in each. The archery-only Sandhill crane, this was something based on feedback I received from a couple of groups of hunters down at the check station this year. They were depressed that we had removed the archery hunt several years ago and expressed their want and need for this to come back just as an opportunity for them. It would move them out of the general pool and open up some space for other hunters. I had 3 requirements of these folks. As they spoke to me about that, I said if I brought this back, for 1, I need you to fill out your surveys, which was an issue before. 2, I need you to send me pictures if you ever harvest a bird, simply because the harvest in this area is very much lower. And 3rd, I wanted them to come and tell you that I was a great American. Hopefully they'll be here soon to tell you that. Juniors only Sandhill crane hunt. This again remains the same, just a calendar shift, 25 hunters with 3 permits each as well. The recommendation of the commission is prepared to hear it.
Go ahead.
The Department recommends Commission vote to approve Commission Order 24 Sandhill Crane in accordance with the final federal frameworks as presented.
Mr. Davis.
Mr. Chairman, the hunt recommendations Commissioners Committee supports Order 24, and I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. We have some motion and a second to approve Commission Order 24 Sandhill Crane. Discussion. Commissioner Zider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to mention that Jonathan, thank him for first of all listening to our constituents and actually considering that recommendation and mulling that over and then taking action on it. That's a perfect model, and I appreciate that. I hope they show up and say that you're a great American. So I would support that, but thank you for that. I want to point that out.
Yes. Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Voting passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. That's it for me today.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was well prepared and very smoothly delivered. Commissioner Director, we have 2 blue slips for.
So we'll go back to the call of the public.
There's no number on them, so I missed them. So we're going to back up to that.
Okay, so we'll go back to the call of the public.
Call of the public. Okay, the first one would be Lon Clifton. My apologies, I'm not seeing this. But then when you get there, state your name and you have 3 minutes.
My name's Lon Clifton. I'm from Skull Valley, Arizona. I'm here to I'm opposed to the new regulation that's being proposed for restriction on game trail cameras on developed water sources. I saw the last webcast. I didn't have a chance to get down here, so I didn't get a chance to interact with any of the officers that were there. my reason for opposing it is that, to me, the game cameras don't develop an unfair chase, and that's what was brought up. They're just another tool for use in hunting. Most hunters have restricted time on their hands for scouting and hunting, and the cameras are just like a set of binoculars. You use them to determine whether certain animals are in an area and whether it's worth your time to spend there to chase the animal or to hunt them. One of the things that was brought up is that there was I believe one of the officers said that they had majority of requests or restrictions on the cameras was like 50 to 1. I disagree with that. Every hunter I've talked to has a positive outlook on the cameras, although there are some that say that a lot of them get stolen or damaged on tanks and so forth. But that's just part of the game that you do when you post your camera. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous speaking in front of people.
You're doing a good job.
Okay. Once again, I just think it's another source to use when you're out there hunting. You could gain the same thing if you had the time. As far as sitting there and patterning an animal, you could sit there and watch that tank day in and day out and gain the same amount of information, except for the amount of time you'd have to spend. So the only restriction I would like to see that is in that particular regulation that's being proposed is a restriction on the Wi-Fi cameras. I do think they do pose a unfair chase, because it's a possibility that somebody could be watching the camera on a computer and radio somebody or talk to somebody and say, hey, there's a certain animal on this tank at this time, and which would give the opportunity to go in there and take that animal at that particular location. But a general game camera, trail camera on a tank, I don't believe poses any of that type of restriction or an unfair chase. That's really all I have. Thank you.
We appreciate you coming down. Thank you, sir. Ron Nixon. Say state your name for the record and make your comments in 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I operate and own a Facebook hunting group called Broadhead Nation, and social media is a very large platform in the hunting world these days. There are very few members of them here, therefore I will speak for all 22,000 members of my Broadhead Nation that I own in our opposition of this trail camera restriction that's being put up. I've emailed in several times. I have a 17-point dissertation that I've emailed in, I hope and certainly think that you gentlemen have seen. I do appreciate that you have taken the time to read the entire thing. In the effort of preparation, I'll simply read my summary that I put on there just to reinstate my opinion on this. Essentially, there is no scientific data that shows a trail camera interferes with natural movement of game. I would argue that the least impact on an area in animal movement is a 5-minute check of a trail camera versus huge hunting parties sitting in a tank all day during a scouting trip or checking cameras around a tank for an hour plus. There's no data showing that a kill is 100% guaranteed because the hunter has a trail camera picture of it. Hunters still need to execute a perfect shot in order to kill, which a trail camera does not assist on. A trail camera cannot release a projectile and assist in taking of game. It simply gives a picture and tells you what was at some point in the past. The potential environmental impact is greater to have cameras sprawled out of the 441 circle all the way around a water source. Trail cameras do offer the average do-it-yourself hunter to compete and have success in the field without having to hire expensive guides. City folk like myself, flatlanders, I don't get a chance to get up and spend 3, 4, 5 days straight scouting. I get 1 day a week for about 3 weeks prior to my hunt, and I need to utilize that time as much as possible. The biggest problem I have, of course, is the fair chase concept. Fair chase, as far as I'm concerned, has been recognized by multiple hunting organizations such as Safari Club International out of Tucson, Pope and Young, Boone and Crockett, Buckmasters, etc. And I don't feel that, with all due respect, the state of Arizona can determine fair chase is different than what is recognized by most international organizations that
something on
hunting.
Facebook? What is it?
The rule is virtually unenforceable, and
A kitten?
as far as
I
trying
thought it
to
was-
improve the
something
take of
like-
wildlife with a camera, even if somebody did have a picture of it, they could simply delete it, and it would be virtually impossible to try and determine that. I personally would rather see game wardens and wildlife managers pursuing poachers and illegal hunters to pursuing legal hunters with licenses, tags, and who contribute significantly to wildlife management. Personally, I strongly support the Arizona Game and Fish Department. I recently signed up as a volunteer to haul water to desert catchments, so I strongly believe in the Arizona Game and Fish Department and the North American model of wildlife management that we observe. I believe we are a model organization, and I say we because I am a volunteer of this organization. We are a model organization internationally and should be recognized as so, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for coming down. Commissioner, hold on a second. Ron? Commissioner Sider?
I have a comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to point out, I'm not sure if you've had the chance on our website or inside of our hunting regulations, but there's an insert in both of those areas that talks about fair chase that explains this kind of in a different perspective than what you've addressed. I would highly recommend you take a look at that, read through that, because there's some more factual information that might help you form a
I do understand the fair chase philosophy that's been put in place. I just don't believe a trail camera allows any take of wildlife. I just don't believe it. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you, sir. Okay, before we get started, did I miss anybody else that wanted to speak on the call to the public? I don't know. I think I'm pretty consistent. At least come on down and give us your name. This is for agenda item 1, general information.
Hello, my name is Kip Perot. I'm an avid sportsman and a conservationist. I'm here to strongly oppose the use of the so-called air bow system. The air bow, as they call it, has absolutely nothing to do with a bow and arrow. Look at the definition of a bow, which you already know. This device gives a very unfair advantage to any archery hunters. I've read over and over on the proposals, and it does not state that it is only for a handicapped hunter with a champ license. It doesn't state that. If you go into legal method of take for the animal, someone would read that and it says the pneumatic device firing an arrow or a bolt. It says that we can take with that weapon where it is legal to use a bow or a crossbow is what it says, and it doesn't go into defined under the animal that I had seen. I could possibly be wrong. These devices are simply a rifle. They are not a bow. They have nothing to do with a bow. I work in the industry. I sell them. I shoot them. They should not be allowed in an archery hunt at all. They're no different than in the 80s. Some of the people in the 80s, they took 410 shotguns, cut the front of the shells off, single shot shotgun, put an arrow in it. It's the same thing. How many of these devices were reviewed by the department? I've talked to Kurt before on the air gun hunting. A completely different issue on that one. So if an air bow is going to be, as they call it, legalized, we've got the Pioneer Air Bow from Crossman. Corporations are pushing their agenda to sell their product at the mercy of our hunting heritage and our animals. As it states in Arizona, going away from the air bow a little bit, still on the pneumatics, a 35 caliber or larger gun, legal for the take of big game. Extremely underpowered. There's nothing there on foot-pounds of energy. Mass and momentum has to be taken into consideration when you're using projectiles under the speed of sound. I did a seminar for Region 2 and Region 6. I had 70 plus officers there. I proved to them why 35 caliber and larger is not a way to do it. We need to put a foot-pound minimum. I see now that part of what I had recommended in previous years, buffalo and elk, they want to legalize it with a 500 foot-pound minimum. So now they're doing it on the buffalo and elk. Why can we not get it on the deer and antelope? At that seminar, a legal method of take, we fired into gel. Scott, the fisheries biologist from Flagstaff, fired the projectile into gel at 20 yards with 2.5 inches of penetration. That is a legal method of take for Arizona hunters to hunt deer, bear, antelope, bighorn sheep. Severely, grossly underpowered. I would really like to see the foot-pound minimum at 350 foot-pounds. I just returned from Boise, Idaho with their meeting. Same thing. I have the mass and minimum charts that I gave out at the seminar. I don't know if they ever made it to you commissioners, but I would like to see that happen also. But the air bows, strongly opposed. Ron Nixon's page, I did a very quick little survey, and it was 98% No, 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 no. I don't know how much you got from the public that said we want this, or if it's strictly a big corporation pushing to sell the product. But I don't want it, and many of the Arizona sportsmen do not want it as a legal method of take in the state of Arizona. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chairman, you have Amber, maybe Amber could come up with, or Jay,
Jay would be
Jay,
I think
about the actual definition for who would be able to use them.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. So yes, the intent, it would only, that weapon type would only be authorized under the crossbow permit. So it would have to be someone with a qualifying disability, as stated in the crossbow permit, could use that for archery seasons. However, it does not authorize it for any other archery seasons, and we did clarify that it would be authorized for general seasons, and there has been some confusion, and we're working on clarifying that, but that was the intent, just because it was ill-defined in the current rule, so we tried to define it more clearly, that it would be authorized for general seasons and only as an alternative to the crossbow and the crossbow permit for a person with a qualifying disability.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, sir. Oh, you got something else? Go ahead.
Right here, taken straight out of the proposal. The commission proposes to allow, and I may be understanding this wrong, and I apologize if I am. The commission proposes to allow the use of pre-charged pneumatic weapons using arrows or bolts for the take of wildlife wherever a bow or crossbow is listed as a lawful method of take for that species. Bear, bighorn sheep, bison, deer, elk, javelina, mountain lion, pronghorn antelope, and turkey. Nowhere in that does it say. Now, if I'm out hunting with that and an officer come to me, there would be an argument. We would go to court, because right here it says wherever archery equipment or crossbow is legal.
Mr. Chairman, so that this would be spelled out under what the authorized weapons are for that archery hunt that you're hunting on. Now, if you've got that in a general season, more power to you, you're okay. But if you try to use that during an archery season, it's not an authorized weapon. So yeah, that officer would have a point.
Well, it needs to be more defined than what it is in the proposal then.
Two different areas. Jay, you want to?
Yeah, so that is the preamble of the rulemaking package. That's not the actual language that's being proposed, and that has been brought up before. That is a little bit confusing how it's worded, but again, it was intended to clarify that they would be lawful for general seasons, and then in the archery only seasons, they specifically say in the commission archery only. So this would again wouldn't be authorized for archery only seasons, but the crossbow permit is a provision, and now it is in a different article. However, it dictates the qualifiers to use a crossbow or this weapon type in it under the criteria to qualify for the permit. So it's only for that. That's the only condition that it could be used. It could not be used in the regular archery only seasons, and that is spelled out in commission order archery only.
Members of the commission, if I could interject, I'm sorry. Because this is a call to the public and it's not agendaed for discussion or deliberation on the Article 3 rules, I would recommend that Jay have a side conversation and explain the rule, the proposed rule, show where the rule it explains this, as opposed to continuing the discussion with the commission.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Jay. Thanks,
Certainly.
sir, for coming
Yep.
down. We're going to be taking this up next month, I believe, for the final approvals. Okay, Mr. Director.
Mr. Chairman, item 3, consideration of proposed commission orders 2, 5 through 10, 13, and 26 for the 2018-19 hunting season, and commission order 23 for the 2018-19 trapping season. Presenters Amber Mudick, Big Game Management Program Supervisor.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think I'd rather go answer that question, or be playing cards with the little boy over there.
Why don't you right where you are?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is my 2017 cow elk hunt up here, and unfortunately I was not drawn this year for elk. So that means that I get to go scuba diving instead.
We're so sorry.
I think I'm going to forego applying for deer too, just go for a bonus point so that I have a wide open fall.
You can join the people out in the audience.
What's that?
You can join the people out here, or you can write us emails if you'll write it all.
I'm presenting the 2018 fall hunt recommendations. These recommendations were established under the guidelines that were approved by the Commission in September of 2017. The current guidelines will be used for all hunts set through the spring of 2023. This recommendation for all species is for a single year. We will be shifting to a 2-year recommendation in April of 2019 for this fall cycle. Our approach is to do elk and pronghorn on even fiscal years, and then to do the fall, which is deer, bighorn, sheep, on odd fiscal years. And we plan to take the spring hunt recommendation package and merge it in amongst these two where appropriate. This recommendation period will not affect when the draws actually occur, so we will still have 3 draw cycles occurring for the various commission orders. For Commission Order 2, deer, we manage both mule deer and whitetail within the parameters listed here. And when we are above or below these parameters, we look at increasing or decreasing permits. Rarely do all 3 of these parameters plus population trend line up, and therefore we bring in the social input and other input from the wildlife managers to make those adjustments. We do manage several units as alternative management units, so these are managed to have older age class bucks in the populations. We do that by having higher buck to doe ratios and managing for higher percentages of class or 3+ age class categories and 5+ age class categories. For our standard management units, for mule deer, we are within guidelines both for the fawn to doe and the buck to doe ratios. This is at a statewide level. And for whitetail deer, the same thing, within guidelines for both of those parameters. Unit 3A, 3C is one of our alternative management units. We do not have the 2017 tooth age data yet, so based on the previous 3-year average, we're still slightly below guidelines, but this unit has been increasing in the percentage of the buck to doe ratio and the 3+ age category of deer in the population. Hunt success is doing very good. For Unit 17A, 2016 was the first year that we collected teeth in this unit, and we sat at 40% of those teeth coming back at 3+ category. We don't have the 2017 data yet. This unit again has been seeing an increasing buck to doe ratio and an increasing hunt success, which are all indicative of an older age class population, more bucks in the population. For 45A, B, and C, we are within guidelines for all 3 parameters, if not going over the top of guidelines slightly. Then the Kaibab mule deer objectives. These objectives are set for the 12A East, 12A West, and 12B seasons. We are within or above guidelines with all 3 units across all 4 parameters here. For the strip units, this is Unit 13A and 13B. Again, we are within or above guidelines for all parameters here. We've intentionally, in both 12A East and all 5 of these units, the 12s and 13s, been backing off on the amount of tags offered to increase that buck to doe ratio and create a stronger older age class population. That approach has been very effective. Some opportunity changes that you're seeing in this recommendation package is a slight increase to the December mule deer hunts in the units where we currently offer December seasons, an increase in the December whitetail deer permits, increase in youth hunt opportunity. Guidelines directed us to increase that opportunity from 5% of the general tags to 8% of the general tags. We did not quite reach that this year. With movement of tags out of general and out of muzzleloader, we got to 7.6% and kind of held there. We do plan to get clear to the 8% with April of 2019 recommendations. One thing that I observed after the elk and pronghorn hunt recommendations is that general hunters were very disappointed in the quantity of tags that were shifted out in 1 year from general into youth. And therefore, once we kind of reached an equilibrium at this 7.6%, we decided to hold off until the next year and then do the final push in 2019. We're also recommending an increase.
How many permits would we lack to get to that to go from 7.6 to 8%? Do you remember what that number was?
We need about 185 permits to additional youth tags, and that is about 275 permits taken out of the general season.
And you're pretty confident that we can do that next April?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We're also recommending an increased opportunity during the December timeframe for the over-the-counter archery deer. So back to the late whitetail seasons. Per guidelines, we were directed to separate how we allocate the December permits based on standard management units versus alternative management units. In previous years, those were combined for the overall percentage of tags in December. So for each standard management whitetail deer unit, we are allocating approximately 5% of the tags in the December timeframe. So you see quite a bit of permit shift going in those whitetail units, and all that is some of them might have called for an increase or decrease in permits, but we were also shifting tags out of one of the 3 earlier seasons into that December timeframe. And then for the alternative management units, it's not part of that 5% allocation. We manage for up to 30% of the harvest to occur in December, and therefore that equates to more permits in the December timeframe. Unit 33 has been a challenging unit for us in the past several years. It's got an increasing whitetail deer population, very, very robust, which has resulted in increasing permits. In 2017, we offered 2 youth hunts, a muzzleloader hunt, 4 whitetail seasons, and then on top of that, we had the 2 mule deer seasons. Hunter crowding has become a significant issue in this unit, and so the region was thinking outside the box and we're recommending adding a 5th general whitetail season to occur before the initial start season. So that would be October 19 through 25. This does create a situation where we pretty much have back-to-back hunts in Unit 33 starting the 2nd week of October through the end of December. That can be a concern too, having constant pressure on a population. However, there isn't any research out there that demonstrates that hunter pressure across a continuous time frame has a population level effect on that species. So our recommendation is adding that 5th permit. We're going to watch and evaluate it this year, and we can make adjustments with the 2019 recommendation. Unit 12A West Youth Hunt, we're recommending no changes here. They are both antlerless only. The early season is for 400 permits. The late season is for 125 permits. One thing to recognize with the youth hunts this year, we typically offer youth hunts to coincide with a school holiday. In October, that's typically around Columbus Day, and that's usually week 41 of the year. Columbus Day this year actually falls on week 40, and where we could shift those youth seasons to start a week earlier, we did. But in some units, we have fall turkey seasons, and we were unable to move that shift forward. And we saw this with elk too. So we have some youth hunts that start October 5th, others that start October 12th, and then of course we have a few that are over the Veterans holiday and some over the Thanksgiving holiday. Unit 16A Youth Muzzleloader, we are recommending moving this season outside of the December timeframe per guidelines and to occur over Thanksgiving. This will be a 10-day season with 2 weekends, and we are also recommending an increase of permits in this unit. This season will also have the companion youth javelina tag associated with it. For the Mohawk Valley hunt area, this hunt was established 2 years ago as an antlerless only youth hunt to address agricultural depredation by deer in the Gila River Valley. It has high hunt success, well above 80% in both years, it has not, the hunt itself has not been effective at reducing the deer accessing the fields, and many of those farmers actually went out and fenced their properties. There are a few that still remain unfenced. The region is committed to working with them and ensuring that we address issues as timely as possible. Our recommendation will be to remove this hunt in the Mohawk Valley. Over-the-counter archery deer, our objective has been to distribute hunters across the 3 different time frames. Our previous guideline approach always had us removing December opportunity first, and then had a graduated removal based on that, starting then into January and so forth. What that did is it put a lot more pressure on units that were open in December, and we started to see that hunt success increase, and therefore those units started to close. So our new guideline approach allows the region to look at open areas within their region and adjacent units and close or reopen seasons within the time frame that seems most appropriate. Our recommendation this year is to revert Unit 6A back into the January 1 through 15 time frame. Last year we moved it into December to try to adjust this approach, and with that unit being an alternative whitetail unit with the late whitetail season in there, and it having a late mule deer hunt, draw mule deer hunt in there also, we felt it best to put this season back into January. In doing that, we're going to move Unit 8 to occur over the December timeframe. It currently has the month-long season in January. It's going to shift forward 2 weeks to start on December 14th and run through January 15th. And lastly, we are recommending adding Unit 16A into the December timeframe for over-the-counter archery deer. In summary, we are offering 48,185 permits. This is a 751 permit increase, and it includes the bonus point only hunt number and an allocation of permits to Hopi tribal members in association with units 4A and 5A and 5B. I have a recommendation on deer when you're ready.
Okay.
The department recommends the commission approve Commission Order 2 deer as presented.
I've got a blue slip for this. Johnny Spear. Yeah, state your name when you get to the podium and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Director, Commissioners, Johnny Spear. Just on the deer, mainly future consideration by the Commission. In the alternative management units, and by the way, 3A, 3C, looking really good, it's coming along. North of the Grand Canyon, units 13A and B, and 12B. And we've managed this for a good period of time for the alternative management, which has been a good thing. I'd like to, for your consideration, in those units, which arguably may be the most important mule deer habitat on this here planet, because of that species and the preservation of oversized mule deer that we see there. A little bit concerned with the commercialization of it in that unit. I know that the older age bucks are decreasing, though our data says that we're holding fairly stable. I believe that in 13A that it was under 3 years old, the harvest over the last couple of years. So in light of this, I'd like to see us consider an archery only hunt in those units on a rotation basis for like a 3 to 5 year to preserve the older age class bucks and the genetics in them. I've spoken with Luke Thompson on this personally, and intend to continue speaking with the Commission and those that will be involved in it. Also, the youth deer hunt, I don't want to attack the youth deer hunt at all on the Kaibab, but I think that we should reconsider. We've hunted the does there for I think upwards of maybe 20 years. I'm thinking we should reconsider on that. I spent most of my life north of the Grand Canyon interacting with mule deer, and I see a lot of habitat on the on the Kaibab and surrounding areas that don't have any deer population. I think it would increase if we took the pressure off the does somewhat. At least we reduce it, we evaluate it. I know we have reduced it because of the numbers in the past. So just for your consideration, these things that, and I'm not standing here in front of you as my own advocate. I'm standing here after having spoke with a lot of different hunters. And of course you do get the plus and minus thing on it. But for the long-term health of our population of mule deer in the state of Arizona, this is just something I'd like to see considered. I've spent my life there. I've seen the difference between a deer under every bush and one that's hard to find. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Danny, we appreciate you coming down. Let me tell you, I was at the break. I talked to you briefly. Next year, we go through hunt recommendation meetings, several of them right around the area. So those ideas, if you bring those to them, they'd be there in time for us to consider it at this meeting. And thank you for coming down.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we could ask Amber to follow up with him and continue that dialogue.
Before we get started, let me ask, since I'm doing such a good job on these blue slips, anybody else that wants to talk about mule deer? I think I've got them separated out now. Okay, go ahead, Amber. You have given us a recommendation, Mr. Commissioner Davis.
Yes, I did.
I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, the Hunt Recommendations Committee has met and reviewed the recommendation, and we would support the recommendations put forward by the department. Also, just want to compliment Amber, you and the region on that Unit 33 whitetail for coming up with a solution for the competing demands in that unit. We appreciate that. So with that, that's my motion that we accept the recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the, I don't have the number in front of me, deer hunt regulations. Any more discussion? In favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Okay, Amber.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, we're at Commission Order 5, Turkey. Turkey has, the hunt success for turkey kind of bounces around depending on weather conditions. This year, with it being very dry, turkeys were pretty tied to water, and therefore we saw hunt success increase. To summarize our recommendation for fall turkey, we are increasing permits in Units 1, 3C, 5B South, 6B, and 27, with a slight decrease in Unit 22. We are also recommending closing the archery-only season in Unit 20A. This is a unit where had that big fire go through there. I draw a blank on the name of the fire today, but pushing the turkeys out of some of their traditional habitat. It's also a unit that we're starting to look at for augmentation, therefore our recommendation to close it. We're recommending no changes to the youth-only hunt opportunity. We are recommending a bonus point only hunt category, and permits would be set at 5,000, a total increase of 200. I have a recommendation on the Commission's ready. The Department recommends that the Commission approve Commission Order 5, Turkey, Fall Turkey as presented.
Mr. Chairman, the Hunt Recommendations Committee concurs, and I would make a motion that we approve the recommendation as presented.
We have a motion and a second to approve the fall turkey hunt regulations. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Amber.
Commission Order 6, Javelina. In the fall, we offer youth javelina seasons only. This year, we're recommending adding Unit 10 to this time frame with 40 permits. It'll equate to 820 permits recommended. The youth javelina seasons typically have they usually overlap with a youth hunt that's in that unit also, so we may have both the draw youth hunt and the draw javelina hunt. And then we also have companion youth javelina tags that those youth deer hunters can purchase in association with a few of those hunts. Currently, we're recommending 7 population management seasons that would coincide with the youth deer hunts. This equates to 855 permits. Just to kind of give you an idea of participation in this type of structure, we only had 75 of these permits purchased in 2017. So those youth hunters who drew deer tags and could also buy a youth javelina tag, we only had 75 hunters doing that. We are recommending a bonus point only hunt category for fall javelina. This bonus point only number is open to all hunters, not just youth hunters. The youth general season includes the addition of Unit 10, and then the archery only over-the-counter seasons, which are open to all hunters, are available in the same units as in the same time frame as previous years. This is the season that overlaps the archery deer hunt in August. We are recommending 820 permits. This is an increase of 40. I have a recommendation when the commission's ready.
Go ahead.
The department recommends the commission approve Commission Order 6, Fall Javelina, as presented.
Mr. Chairman, the Hunt Recommendations Committee concurs and move that we approve the recommendation as presented.
We have a motion and a second to approve Commission Order 6, Javelina. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Amber?
Commission Order 7, Bighorn Sheep. You know, I got an email the other day from a lady saying that she had spotted a 3-horned bighorn sheep out there, and how common was that, and could it even be possible? And I'm like, well, anything's possible, but it's not very common. And I asked her to send me a picture. So she sends me this, and you know, without zooming in on it, it's pretty impressive. Then I zoomed in and looked a little closer, and I found 4 horns, and I found 5 legs. And it's pretty amazing. And you've got 2 different shades of pelt on the bighorn sheep, and it's pretty amazing that she captured this picture with these 2 rams perfectly lined up to create a pretty interesting anomaly. Our hunt management objectives are to provide permits based on 15 to 25% of the Class 3 and Class 4 rams in a population. I added this picture. The drawing of the rams really isn't that great, but a Class 3 ram is a 6 to 8 year old ram, and a Class 4 ram is a 9+ ram. So we're really looking at that older age class of rams in a population. Our average score for bighorn sheep has been pretty steady, riding just above 160 for at least the past 5 years, past 10 years almost. One change that we're looking at is in Unit 13A. We are recommending adjusting the open areas that occur around Kanab Creek and north up to Cottonwood Wilderness area. In 2017, we had 2 seasons. We had Unit 13A, which was the west side of Kanab Creek, all the way up to the Utah border, including the Cottonwood Wilderness area. And then we had a hunt on the east side of Kanab Creek, which included 12A West and 12B West. The population in Kanab Creek itself has been struggling, and so the department's looking at no change in permits overall, but just adjusting the open area structure. We're recommending a standalone hunt in Cottonwood Wilderness for 13A North, and then combining the 13A South, both sides of Kanab Creek, which would be the 12A West, 12B West, and 13A South portion of the unit for a single permit down there. We are also we are recommending an increase in permits in Unit 15D. 15D is where we've had that disease outbreak the past several years. We are still seeing sick animals in there, but on survey we did see more sheep total and a high proportion of Class 3 and Class 4 rams. A very low proportion of Class 1 and Class 2 rams, and no lambs were seen on survey. So this unit is not, we're not seeing recruitment into it, and but we are able to take advantage of the older age class rams in there. Therefore, the recommendation is to stratify 15 into north and south, 15D into north and south, and put an additional 2 permits in there. For the regulations, a formatting that we like to see in there is labeling both the desert and the Rocky Mountain hunts, separation of hunts that have the extreme limited access, and those are pulled out of the main block of units and brought into their own section. This includes the 46A and B hunts and the Superstition Wilderness hunt. Then areas with specific either access restrictions or may have limited opportunity, limited ability to find sheep at given times are highlighted in red. The department is recommending the bonus point only hunt category. We are recommending 111 permits total. This is an increase of 7. Those increases, I'm not going to read it all. You can, the increases are provided there. We are recommending removing the lower Blue River hunt area, closing it this year. And then, as I said before, stratifying the 13A and 12A, 12B West hunts and the 15D hunts. The department has a recommendation when the commission's ready.
I have a question first for you. As far as the, I'm happy to see the increase in the harvest numbers for the age and for the score of the sheep for the last 25 years, whatever. Can you tell us, would it be education, equipment, or what would be the cost overall? Because we want to take the older ones, obviously, so.
Chairman Ammons, you're asking why we're seeing an increase in the age?
I guess in your opinion or professionally, why would it be a nice increase from 1995 up to where we're at now?
We have better scores. It could be a number of things. Weather conditions, when you've got good vegetation out there, you're going to have better horn growth. So in the late 90s or early 90s, we had some good horn growth. In the late 90s, when we had some of those weather conditions coming through, you could have that contributing to better horn growth through that population. One thing that we are seeing that does carry this is in Unit 15D and then in Unit 22 and 24B. Those populations have been just expanding because of conditions and producing very large animals out of those 3 core areas alone, and that will start to skew your overall average up some too. Some of our areas where we have seen lower scores, some of the southwestern stuff where some of the units where it's typical to have a 150 to 160 ram coming out of there. Many of those are still producing that same quality of ram.
Go ahead with your recommendation.
The department recommends that the commission approve Commission Order 7 Bighorn sheep as presented.
Mr. Chairman, the Hunt Recommendations Committee concurs, and I make that motion.
I got a blue slip, by the way. Let me squeeze that in.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'll get these blue slips straightened out. Greg Coons. Would you state your name for the record? You have 3 minutes for your comments.
Good morning. Greg Coons, representing the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society, on the board of directors there. And my concern is the reduction in permits in 46B East. I've hunted that unit the last 2 years. The reduction is strictly based on the poor survey that they had this past year, which that mountain range received very low precipitation. The best feed was on the desert floor. The older age class rams and the majority of the sheep were on the desert floor at the time of the survey and during the hunt. 3 of the 4 rams killed this last year were killed on the desert floor. So that is typically not surveyed, so these rams were missed. The last 2 years, all 4 of the hunters, or all 4, there's been 4 permits per year. The first year, all 4 of the rams were killed within the first week. Last year, 3 of the 4 rams were killed within the first week. There's plenty of sheep there to support 2 to 3 tags. I do support 1, maybe 2 tag reduction in that unit. I know of 2 170 rams that were not killed this year. We missed 1. Another hunter saw 1 that was not killed. there are older age class rams there. There's plenty of sheep to support 2 to 3 tags in that unit. So I would highly suggest that we reconsider that choice to reduce the tags by 75%. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody have a question? Thank you for coming down, taking your time. Okay, Commissioner Zyler.
Mr. Chairman, the Hunt Recommendations Committee has considered this, and we concur, and I would make the motion that we approve this Commission Order 7.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Commission Order 7, Bighorn Sheep Designation. What the gentleman said, we have a letter, do we not, that the Sheep Society concurred with what we're doing here?
I do not have a letter from the Sheep Society in the comments
In the
that you
past we
received.
have, right?
Yes, we do, typically.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's 5-0.
Mr. Chairman, to follow up on that point, would it be possible, obviously, to get with him after and then see if our survey work would conform with what he's talking about, and maybe it is, or maybe it is, check on that so that we can have that discussion earlier next year in the process.
Yeah, this is a little late for you talking about it, but I would like to see it also ahead of time. If he's correct, then we can change the procedure.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, when we conduct surveys, the permit numbers are based on those surveys unless we have other information that can support additional tags. There's some units where we have very poor surveys. Unit 16A is one of those, and the entire hunt recommendation is based off of camera data. So the region does engage with Mr. Coons and will continue to do so with him and others on other information that can inform what those tag permits may be.
If we do that, would be great. Okay, go ahead.
Commission Order 8, Bison. For the Raymond herd, we are recommending 3 designated bull hunts with 2 permits each. Our objective for the Raymond population, this is a brand new population. It's currently sitting a little above a 1-to-1 bull to cow ratio, and we want to get that ratio close to 1-to-1. So this recommendation will achieve that. We are maintaining the ability to have population management hunts across both wildlife areas, both bison herds, in order to address any issues if those bison start to leave areas where we desire to have them. For the House Rock population, we are recommending 3 general cow hunts with 10 permits, 1 muzzleloader cow hunt, and 1 archery cow hunt with 10 permits. In all 5 of these hunts, the House Rock wildlife area, the entire wildlife area, is recommended to be closed to hunting. In summary, we are recommending the bonus point only hunt category, the Raymond herd with 6 permits. This is a decrease of 6 from last year. Last year we were trying to depopulate that herd. For House Rock, we're recommending 50 permits, an increase of 4. We had a slight adjustment in the season time frame, specifically the last hunt, which was now a 6-week hunt, and felt that we could increase that hunt from 6 permits to 10 permits. So that's your increase there. I have a recommendation when the commission's ready.
Go ahead.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. And I want to direct this maybe at Craig would be the right person on this. The Raymond herd, the designated hunts, if the commission were to approve this, there was going to be 3 designated hunts of 2 permits each. How old will those bulls be in the fall?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Zyler, so they'll be 3-year-old bulls in the fall. The oldest of them, we had yearlings and 2-year-olds that were delivered, so approximately half the bulls we have there will be 3 and half will be 2.
Thank you.
The department recommends the commission approve Commission Order 8 Bison as presented.
So moved.
You agree?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Commission Order 8, Bison. More discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Commission Order 9, Black Bear. Our management objectives for bear are to stratify general fall bear seasons. Each hunt has a female harvest limit attached to it, and then each unit has an annual female harvest limit attached to it. The annual limit is cumulative. It includes any harvest from previous hunts during the year and department take. And the annual female limit is set to achieve 10% or less of the female segment of the population, take of 10% or less. In 2017, we harvested 285 bears, with 106 of those being females, and we sold over 4,500 tags. Seasons are recommended for August 10 through 23, August 24 through September 13th, and August 5th through December 31. This is the bulk of the units across the state. However, in units 4A, we're recommending that 4A and 5A, that season doesn't start until November 2nd and run through the end of the year. This is because we tend to see high female harvest in these two units, and we were having a greater impact on that female population. So we moved the season later in the year several years ago, and this season structure seems to work very well for those two units. In units 27 and then 29 and 30A, we're looking at stratifying these hunts in that October to December time frame. All three of these units have a very robust bear population, and we tended to see them close early in the year, but still have the ability to harvest later in the year. So high female harvest early in the year, but open it up again later in the year to allow for some more male harvest. Overall, we are looking at no change to the female harvest limits for general, and an increase of 1 during the archery structure. This is in the unit 2938 hunt area. The mandatory checkout will still be in place. I have a recommendation when the commission's ready.
Go ahead.
The department recommends the commission approve Commission Order 9 Black Bear as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve Commission Order 9 on Black Bear as presented.
We have a motion and a second to approve Commission Order 9 Bear. More discussion? In favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. We're going to take ourselves about a 10-minute break here before we get to the next item. So 20 till. We'll be back.